I used to think that generosity was my greatest strength, that giving, without asking for anything in return, was a sign of love of family. But if there's anything life has taught me, it's that love, when weaponized, leaves the deepest wounds. For 2 years, I practically carried my younger brother Ryan and his girlfriend Sophie on my back. Rent, groceries, utility bills, even a used car. It didn't happen all at once, it never does. It started small, like all obligations born from empathy. One desperate phone call, one teary voice. We're in a tight spot. Just until next month. They had just moved into a run-down apartment in a suburb not far from mine. Ryan had been laid off again. Sophie was still piecing together retail jobs, and their optimism was naive, bordering on dangerous. I was doing well at the time, career in marketing. Decent apartment, no major responsibilities but myself. So I said yes. Of course I did. 1 month bled into another, and somehow, by their 1-year anniversary, I had become the unofficial financier of their lives. Rent? On me. Gas bills? Me. Sophie mentioned walking in the cold, and the next week, I surprised them with a modest used car. I didn't even flinch. That's what you do for family, right? Except family doesn't treat you like an ATM with a heart. At first, I told myself it was temporary, a rough patch, a favor. But Ryan? He never even tried. Every time he lost a job, there was always a reason. My boss was out to get me. I hurt my ankle. I'm too depressed to apply for anything right now. The excuses evolved faster than I could process them. And Sophie, she began to act like all of this was perfectly normal, like I was some silent investor in their mediocre, half-formed lives. They always had new dreams, fresh ideas. We're going to start a small business, she'd say, eyes bright. We just need a bit more help for the startup. Or Ryan would want to take a certification course. If only I could cover the tuition. Nothing ever happened. No business, no course, just more bills. I wish I could say I was strong enough to walk away then, but guilt has a way of softening your spine. Every time I considered cutting them off, Ryan would call, his voice cracked and broken, telling me how much they appreciated me, how they'd be homeless without me. And so I gave, again and again. But this story isn't just about money. It never was. It's about betrayal, the kind that doesn't just drain your bank account, but poisons your name. That betrayal hadn't revealed itself yet, but it was coming. And when it did, it wouldn't just break my heart. It would tear apart everything I believed about loyalty, trust, and what it means to be a sister. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, like the slow dimming of lights in a room you don't realize is growing dark. Calls from my mother, Nancy, started to taper off. Texts from Carol, her partner, turned from warm check-ins to polite one-word responses. I didn't panic. Life gets busy. People drift, or so I told myself. But then came the silence. 2 weeks, then 3. No returned calls, no birthday wishes, not even a heart emoji on a photo I shared from my trip to the coast. It was like I'd become invisible to them overnight. And yet, whenever I asked Ryan or Sophie if they'd spoken to our moms, the answer was always the same. Oh yeah, they're just swamped. Church stuff. Carol's redoing the kitchen. Nothing's wrong. I believed them. I wanted to. I had no reason not to. Until one Sunday morning, sipping coffee in my kitchen, I ran into Melissa, Ryan's half-sister, at the farmer's market. She casually mentioned that Nancy seemed a little off lately, distracted, withdrawn. Still, I brushed it off. I had more pressing things to worry about. Sophie had just told me their rent went up by $200, and if they couldn't cover it, they'd be out on the street. I Venmo'd them the difference that night, thinking, this will be the last time. But it never was. March brought the urgent tire replacement for the car I bought them. April? Groceries, because Ryan had caught some stomach bug and couldn't work his side gig delivering food. And Sophie always downplayed the asks with that same sugar-coated phrase, we're almost stable. Just one more push, Em. I promise. The pushes never stopped. Still, I didn't pull away. Not until May. That's when I broke. I drove to Nancy and Carol's house unannounced. I brought flowers. I wore my nicest blouse. I stood on their porch like a hopeful child. Nancy opened the door with a look I hadn't seen in years, one that stung. She didn't smile. Carol didn't even get up from her chair inside. Hi, I said, as cheerful as I could fake it. It's been a while. Nancy crossed her arms. Has it? That was when I knew something was very wrong. The conversation that followed didn't just hurt. It shattered. They weren't distant because they were busy. They were distant because, as Nancy put it, we know how you really feel about us. Apparently, I was ungrateful, selfish, hateful. According to them, I had spent months bad-mouthing them, saying they were outdated, controlling, that I was too good for their small-town ways, that I'd bragged about being successful despite them, that I didn't need them. But I hadn't said any of that. I didn't need to ask who told them. I already knew. Ryan, Sophie, or maybe both. I left their house dazed, my mind spiraling. What hurt wasn't just that they believed the lies, it was that I had paid for the privilege of being slandered. I had financed the betrayal. That night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying months of conversations, the subtle shifts, the weird timing, the way Ryan always seemed to nudge me away from reaching out to our moms. They'd isolated me, manipulated the story. And for what? To secure the money and the sympathy. But that was the moment the light switched back on. I saw it all for what it was, and I was done being the fool. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every memory felt infected. Every text I'd ever sent Ryan or Sophie rang with new meaning. The fake gratitude, the carefully timed emergencies, the disarming smiles. They weren't desperation. They were strategy. So I did what any woman with too much anger and not enough closure would do. I called Sophie. "We need to talk," I said flatly. She hesitated. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, face to face. She showed up that evening, dragging Ryan along like some lost puppy. He slouched on my couch, eyes glued to his phone, while Sophie gave me a tight, rehearsed smile. "What's going on?" she asked. I didn't bother sitting. I went to see Nancy and Carol. That wiped the smile right off her face. "They think I hate them," I continued. "They think I've been trashing them for months. Want to guess who gave them that impression?" Her eyes widened. "Emily, I swear, don't." I cut her off. "Don't lie again. You told them I didn't care about them, that I said they were a burden, that I bragged about being better than them. I've never said those things, ever." Ryan looked up from his phone. "Whoa, that's not what we meant." "Shut up, Ryan," I snapped. "You let her lie to them. You let them believe I was ungrateful while I was paying your damn rent." Sophie's voice was trembling now. "We didn't mean for it to go that far. It just spiraled." "No," I said. "It didn't spiral. It escalated. You lied to drive a wedge between me and our moms so they'd stop helping me and help you instead." Her face flushed deep red. Ryan shifted awkwardly. "This is getting blown out of proportion." I turned on him. "You haven't worked in 2 years. 2 years. You let me fund your life while Sophie fed our family lies." Ryan's mask slipped for just a second. He clenched his jaw but said nothing. "I'm done," I said. "No more money. No more groceries. No more car repairs or internet bills. Figure it out yourselves." "You can't do this," Sophie whispered, voice cracking. "Watch me." They didn't take it well. Sophie started crying, trying to reel it back. "Emily, please, we're sorry. It wasn't supposed to get this bad." Ryan stood, pacing, his voice rising. "You're just gonna cut us off after everything we've been through?" I laughed, cold and bitter. "You've been through? I was the one paying your way, while you sabotaged my relationship with our moms. I was trying to get on my feet," he barked. "No," I said calmly. "You were trying to get comfortable. Big difference. And that should have been the end. I should have felt triumphant, liberated. But life doesn't wrap up so neatly." 2 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Is this Emily?" "Speaking. Who's this?" "My name's Melissa. I'm Ryan's half-sister, on his dad's side." My chest tightened. "Okay, I know this might be weird, but I've been hearing things, and I thought you should know." She didn't waste time. "Ryan's been lying to everyone," she said. "Not just you, not just Sophie. He's been gambling." My heart dropped. "What?" "Yeah, for years. He's in deep debt, loan sharks, all of it. That money you've been sending, most of it's gone to casinos or online betting. He spins these sob stories, gets sympathy money, and burns it all trying to win it back." I sat in stunned silence. "I tried to warn Sophie," Melissa added, "but she wouldn't believe me." I figured, now that you're done helping him, you deserve to know the truth. Maybe it'll help. I thanked her, hung up, and sat on my floor for nearly an hour staring at the wall. Everything made sense now. The emergencies, the relentless need, why no amount was ever enough. But one question gnawed at me. Did Sophie know? Had she really been that naive? Or was she just playing dumb, hoping I wouldn't connect the dots? There was only one way to find out. The next morning I drove to their apartment unannounced this time. Sophie opened the door in pajamas, looking like she hadn't slept. Ryan didn't even look up from the couch. "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside before she could answer. She blinked. "Emily, now's not a good." "I got a call," I interrupted, "from Melissa." Sophie froze. She told me what Ryan's been doing with the money, the gambling, the lies, the debt. She turned slowly toward him. Ryan, he didn't move. Tell me it's not true, she said. Her voice wasn't angry yet just hollow. He hesitated. She's just jealous. Always hated me. Ryan, his shoulders slumped. I was trying to make more money. I thought I could fix things. Sophie's face went pale. You've been gambling? While I've been lying to Emily? To her mom's? Covering for you? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She backed away like he'd struck her. I've been begging for money. I ruined Emily's relationship with her family. And you were just throwing it all away? I stepped back, giving them space. Not because I cared to see the fallout, but because I didn't want to be part of it. I'm done, I said quietly. Whatever this is, you can figure it out without me. I walked out as Sophie started yelling raw, betrayed, breaking apart. Her voice followed me down the hallway, and for once, I didn't feel guilty. For the first time in years, I felt free. It had been a week since I walked out of their apartment, leaving Sophie and Ryan to implode under the weight of their lies. For the first time in years, my phone was quiet. No texts about overdue rent. No desperate voicemails begging for just a little help until Friday. Silence, it turned out, was peaceful until it wasn't. It was a Tuesday evening when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sophie standing there, alone. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She was holding a reusable grocery bag, but there was nothing in it. I think she just needed something to clutch. Can I come in? She asked. I didn't say anything at first. The last time she was here, she'd been lying through her teeth, but something in her face had changed. She looked hollow. I stepped aside. She dropped onto my couch like someone who hadn't sat down in days. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then, Ryan moved out, she whispered. I didn't respond. We had a huge fight after you left. He finally admitted everything Melissa was right. He's been gambling for years. It started before we met. I didn't know Emily. I swear I didn't. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she covered her face with her hands. I want to believe you, I said quietly, but it's hard. I know, she whispered. I was so deep in it. I thought I was helping him. I thought if I just kept us afloat a little longer, he'd turn things around. She looked up at me, and for the first time, she wasn't performing. I lied to Nancy and Carol because I was scared. We were desperate, and Ryan said they wouldn't help us if they thought we were just leeching off you. He said if they saw you as the selfish one, they'd trust us more. I flinched. The words stung, even though I'd already guessed the truth. I'm not asking for money, she added quickly. I didn't know where else to go. There it was again, desperation, but it was different now. Not calculated, not theatrical, just human, damaged and real. I'm sorry, she said, voice barely above a whisper, for everything, for lying, for hurting you, for letting Ryan control the narrative. I know I can't undo it, but I needed to say it. I wanted to hold on to my anger. I deserved to be angry, but seeing her unravel in front of me didn't bring the satisfaction I'd expected. I believe you didn't know everything, I said, but you knew enough. You knew what you were doing to me. You chose him. You let me be the villain because it made your life easier. She nodded slowly. I know. We sat in silence again. What about Nancy and Carol? I asked finally. They still think I'm the ungrateful one. I'll fix it, she said immediately. I'll tell them the truth. Everything. You better, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Because I'm not playing the scapegoat anymore, Sophie. I've been more than generous. I've been a damn lifeline. And you burned me. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. I know, she said again. I'm so sorry, Emily. I really truly am. I nodded. Then go make it right. She left without asking for anything else. A few days later, I got a call from Nancy. Emily, she said softly, we need to talk. When I arrived at their house, the tension in the room was thick, but different this time. Less blame, more regret. Carol sat beside Nancy, both of them looking older than I remembered. We owe you an apology, Nancy began. Sophie came by yesterday. She told us everything. Carol nodded. We were wrong. We believed lies because they fit a narrative we wanted to believe. That you were just distant, too busy, too successful, and that hurt. But it wasn't fair. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. You've always been there for this family, Nancy added, and we let her twist that into something ugly. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. It means more than you know. Then Nancy dropped a bombshell of her own. Sophie's moving in with us, she said. She's divorcing Ryan. Says she wants to get her life back together. We're going to help her. I blinked. You're sure that's a good idea? She's our daughter-in-law, Carol said. Or was. We can't just throw her out. She's not Ryan, and she's trying. I nodded slowly. Okay, that's your decision. I just hope she doesn't fall into old patterns. So do we, Nancy said. But we're not helping Ryan anymore. That's done. I didn't push. It wasn't my place to tell them how to handle her. I was just grateful to be out of the mess. And Ryan? Well, according to Melissa, he was couch surfing. Again, borrowing money from old friends, burning bridges faster than he could cross them. Last I heard, he was living in his car. I wish I could say I felt bad, but I didn't. He made his choices. As I drove home, a strange peace settled over me. I had no illusions about Sophie becoming my friend, or Ryan ever apologizing, but I had my name back, my family back, and most importantly, I had myself back. For a while, things were. Still, Sophie was living with Nancy and Carol, supposedly rebuilding her life. She got a part-time job at a floral shop downtown, started therapy, or so I heard. There were no more urgent messages, no passive-aggressive hints about money, no whispers about groceries or overdue rent, just distance. It was the kind of quiet that lets you breathe, and I really thought the storm had passed. Until I got a call from Mark. Mark was an old acquaintance from Ryan's wedding, a friend of his I barely knew but had once shared a drink with during the reception. I hadn't heard his name in years. When I saw it pop up on my phone, I almost let it ring out of pure fatigue. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hey, Emily," he said. "This is a little random, but I think you should know something." My stomach tightened. I knew that tone. It was the same one Melissa had used before blowing my world apart. "Ryan's been talking," Mark continued, "a lot. He's telling people you were part of the reason his marriage failed, that you sent him money because you felt guilty about how you treated Sophie growing up." I froze. "What?" "He's saying you bullied her, controlled her, made her feel small, that all the money you gave was penance." I laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief. "That's insane." "I know," he said. "But the problem is people are starting to believe him. He's charismatic when he wants to be. He's playing the victim. And Sophie, she's not exactly correcting him." I sat down slowly, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" "She doesn't confirm it," Mark said carefully, "but she doesn't deny it either. When people ask, she says things like, 'It's complicated,' or 'We've had our issues.' But she's family." I felt like the floor beneath me had disappeared. After everything, after the truth had come out, after she'd cried on my couch and said she was sorry, she was still letting Ryan rewrite history. I didn't call her right away. I let myself sit with it for a day, letting the old, familiar bitterness creep back in, because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a pattern. And this time I wasn't going to be silent. That night I called her. "Hey," she answered. Her tone was casual, comfortable, like we were normal now. "What the hell is going on, Sophie?" Silence. "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "I talked to Mark. I know what Ryan's been saying, and I know you're not stopping him." Her tone shifted instantly. "Emily, I didn't say any of that, but you're not denying it either," I cut in. "You're letting people believe I was some controlling monster, that I bullied you into taking my money." "Are you kidding me?" "I didn't want to stir up more drama," she began. "Too late. You already did." Her voice dropped. "I thought it would all blow over, that it didn't matter anymore." "It does matter," I said coldly, "because I finally got my life back. I finally stopped cleaning up your mess. And now you're standing by while Ryan poisons the story all over again." There was a long pause on her end. "I'm sorry," she said at last. "You're right. I should have shut it down." "No," I said. "You shouldn't have let it start." I hung up before she could respond. A week later, I got another call from Nancy. "Emily," she said, her tone sharp. "Why are people saying you bullied Sophie when she was younger?" I almost dropped the phone. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just explained. "That's Ryan's story," I said, and Sophie's silence. There was a heavy sigh. This family. God. I thought we were past this. So did I. That was the moment I knew. Some people don't change. Not really. They say sorry. They cry. They make promises. But when it comes time to protect you the way you protected them, they disappear. So I made a decision. I didn't call Sophie again. I didn't wait for another apology. I didn't try to fix things with Nancy and Carol, not this time. I let go. I stopped defending myself. Let people believe what they wanted. If someone was willing to believe I was the villain, after all I'd done, then maybe they were never really on my side. Ryan faded into the ether. No one talks about him much now. I hear rumors, more gambling, more bridges burned, still sleeping in his car, still blaming everyone but himself. Sophie? She's still at Nancy and Carol's, still playing the part of the reformed survivor. She has a new job now, I think. She posts pastel quotes on Instagram about healing and growth. I scroll past them like you'd walk by a painting that once moved you, but now feels hollow. And me? I moved on. I travel more. I started therapy. I joined a hiking group. I met someone nothing serious yet, but kind. Quiet. Someone who has no idea what I've been through, and I like it that way, because I'm done explaining myself. I'm done cleaning up the narrative. Sometimes the people closest to you build the most fragile versions of you. Versions that serve their stories. I used to think I needed to rebuild those bridges. Now, I just walk the other way. Story 2. You ever have someone in your life who exhausts every drop of empathy you have? That's my older sister, Sabrina. I'm 27 now, and for as long as I can remember, she's been a black hole of drama and entitlement. The type of person who can flip any situation, no matter how small, into a full-blown crisis that somehow makes her the victim. And somehow, she thinks I owe her for that? Let me backtrack. Sabrina is 4 years older than me. Our parents had her when they were still in college, young, broke, and completely unprepared. For the first couple of years, she stayed mostly with our grandparents, while our mom and dad finished their degrees. I think that's where it started, her need for constant validation. She grew up craving attention and never quite learned how to share it. When I was born, it was like I was the ultimate threat to her throne. My earliest memories are of her yanking my hair, shoving me away if I got too close, and slamming doors in my face if I tried to talk to her. She wasn't just a typical bossy older sibling. She was mean calculated even. She'd lock me in rooms to stop me from going to our parents, kick me under the table if I dared speak at dinner, steal my things just to see me cry. Our parents, bless them, thought it was normal sibling rivalry, but it wasn't, not even close. There was one day I must have been around 6 that sealed everything for me. She asked me to play catch in the yard while Mom napped, and Dad was at work. I was excited, stupidly hopeful, but instead of tossing the ball back and forth, she kept launching it at my face, over and over. When I finally caught a nosebleed and tried to run inside, she blocked me, told me if I tattled, she'd make sure I regretted it. I was crying, bleeding, and terrified. And yeah, I lied. I told our parents I tripped, but the truth came out when Dad checked the security cams he'd recently installed. The footage showed everything. Dad was furious. Mom tried to soften it, saying Sabrina must have been having a bad day. Sabrina didn't change. If anything, she doubled down. Middle school, she'd humiliate me in front of friends. High school, she'd shove me into lockers when no teachers were around. At home, it was more of the same guilt trips, gaslighting, and the occasional burst of physical aggression. So I started fighting back, not with fists. I learned how to hold my ground. When she mocked my clothes, I threw her fashion sense right back at her. When she spread rumors, I made sure Dad heard every detail of what she'd done. He was the only one who held her accountable. Mom tried the gentle parenting route, which, let's be honest, just gave Sabrina more space to manipulate. Fast forward, Sabrina finishes high school and declares she's taking a gap year. No college applications. No career plan, just vibes and plane tickets. Our parents weren't thrilled, especially Dad. He told her she could travel during breaks from school, but she refused. So he cut her off financially after that first year of backpacking across Europe. She tried to become a digital nomad, but surprise. Turns out, most remote jobs still expect you to have basic qualifications. So she bounced between volunteering gigs for room and board and calling our mom whenever she needed cash. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I loved school. Got into my dream college with a partial scholarship. My parents were proud. Relatives even threw a small celebration for me. It was the first time I felt like I was being seen for my own achievements, not just as Sabrina's younger sister. Of course, Sabrina saw it as a personal attack. She hadn't been home in 5 months, but the moment she heard about the party, she started calling Mom nonstop, accusing her of favoritism, of flaunting my success in her face. I didn't even want her there, but Mom insisted. So, Sabrina showed up. No congratulations, just passive-aggressive comments and glass after glass of wine. By the time our grandfather started his toast, Sabrina had enough alcohol in her system to let loose. She interrupted him snorting mid-speech, then laughing loudly before accusing everyone of being fake. She called me the golden child, accused my parents of abandoning her, and claimed they'd ruined her life by not supporting her dreams. It was mortifying. My grandfather, who's one of the kindest men alive, actually raised his voice, told her flat out that she was delusional, if she thought she hadn't been supported, that if she wanted to be proud of something, she should try doing something first. She stormed out. Mom followed. That night was the last time I saw Sabrina for a long time. While I went off to college, she stayed home, refused to get a job, spent her days drinking and hanging out with people who had zero ambition. Dad tried to help. He even made her a resume. She applied to a handful of places, got rejected, and gave up. Then came the car accident. She was drunk, crashed into someone's front fence. No one got hurt, thank God, but the car was wrecked, and the insurance company refused to pay out because she was under the influence. Dad had to cover everything out of pocket. He was livid. Gave her an ultimatum, get a job and go to therapy, or get out. She refused. Claimed he never gave me ultimatums, that he always favored me. Dad wasn't having it this time. She got kicked out. She called everyone in our extended family looking for a place to crash. No one said yes. Not after hearing about the accident. Then get this, she called me, asked for money. I had a bit saved from a high school job, so despite everything, I helped her out. I hoped she'd use it to get a place to live, or at least stabilize. Nope, she blew it on drinks and parties. Didn't even try to hide it, posted it all over Snapchat. When I messaged her, she blocked me. That was the final straw. I was done. For the next 3 years, we barely heard from her. And honestly, life was better without her chaos. Then, during my senior year of college, she resurfaced. She called me out of nowhere, acting like nothing ever happened. Asked me how I was. Talked about forgiving the past, whatever that meant. Then she dropped the real reason for her call. She had met someone. His name was Jason. She described him like he was a prince out of a rom-com, handsome, smart, and kind. She wanted me to come meet him. Said our parents would be there too. I was suspicious, but also curious. So I went. Jason was surprisingly normal, maybe even too good for her, if I'm being honest. He seemed genuinely in love with her. Talked about how amazing she was, how she graduated from Berkeley with honors, how they met at a marketing firm where she led campaigns. That's when the alarms started ringing. Sabrina? Berkeley? She didn't even apply to college. None of that was true. I glanced at my parents. Their faces mirrored mine, confusion, then realization. Sabrina avoided eye contact. After lunch, she called us and begged us not to tell Jason the truth. Dad wasn't letting it go that easily. He pressed her. She finally admitted she had forged a degree to get the job, even faked transcripts. Jason didn't know about the DUI either, or that she'd been kicked out of our parents' house. Dad told her she had to come clean. She refused. She said Jason didn't need to know, that it wouldn't matter once they were married, that he'd never find out. I wanted to stay out of it. Really, I did. But when she announced her engagement 3 months later and had the audacity to demand I plan her entire wedding, I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. Not after everything she'd done. Not after the way she tried to manipulate me again. And especially not when Jason, the only decent person she'd ever brought around, was being dragged into her web of lies. I tried to keep my distance after that whole lunch incident. I mean, it was already a mess. My sister lying to her fiancé about graduating from Berkeley was one thing, but building her whole personality around it, that was a whole different level of delusion. And then she got engaged. She called me like it was the happiest day of her life. Jason proposed, she squealed, like we were some close-knit pair of sisters who text every day and share lip gloss. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a bitter person. If she was genuinely happy and had turned her life around, I would have cheered her on. But we both knew her relationship was built on a lie. And when I asked her very gently, mind you, if she thought it was a little fast, she scoffed and said, "You wouldn't understand. You've never been in love like this." Sure, Sabrina. Keep telling yourself that. Then came the kicker. She wanted me to plan her wedding, not be her maid of honor, not even a bridesmaid, just her unpaid full-time wedding planner. When I asked who was standing by her side during the ceremony, she rattled off names of coworkers I'd never even met. So I asked, then why me? Why ask me to plan it? She responded like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because you're still in college and you have more free time than everyone else. I laughed. Like, actually laughed out loud. I was in my final year, buried under projects and internship applications, trying to graduate with honors. Meanwhile, she's out here trying to hand me a full-time event planning job, like it's a favor to me. I said no, respectfully, clearly, and firmly. I can help with small stuff, but I can't take on your whole wedding. That's a full-time job. You'll need a planner or some help from your bridal party. Apparently, That made me selfish. She ranted about how I never support her, how family is supposed to come through during big life moments. She tried to rope our parents into convincing me, but thankfully, they stayed out of it this time. They knew what I had on my plate, and frankly, they were tired of her constant entitlement too. After I refused, she ghosted me for a while. Then I got an invite, well, not a formal one, just a text to her engagement party. You can help with drinks or something if you're coming. That was it. No, can't wait to see you. No, thank you for coming. Just, you can help serve drinks. I wasn't even sure I was going to go, but something in me, curiosity, maybe said yes. I needed to see Jason again. I couldn't shake the guilt of watching him build his future on a stack of lies. So I made the trip. 6-hour bus ride, minimal sleep, and when I got to her place, she didn't even say hi. She barely looked at me, just took my bag and said, "You're late. The server's canceled. Go help with the drinks." I blinked. Wait, what? We need someone on trays. Just until the event gets rolling. She didn't even give me time to change out of my bus clothes. Just shoved me toward the kitchen and told me to get moving. My parents were as surprised as I was to see me handing out champagne flutes to her guests, like some part-time caterer. But I gave them a little smile to let them know I was fine. I wasn't going to let her make me feel small again. Besides, it gave me the perfect opening. I'd brought a note written carefully, folded neatly, and tucked into my pocket. It explained everything: the fake degree, the job lies, the DUI, her history of manipulation, and most importantly, it wasn't emotional or petty, just the facts laid out calmly. So when I saw Jason standing near the window, laughing with one of his friends, I made my move. I walked over with a glass of wine, handed it to him, smiled and said, "Hey, just a heads up when you get a sec, read this." He looked confused, but took the note, slipped it into his jacket pocket without asking questions. 15 minutes later, he disappeared into the guest bathroom. 10 minutes after that, he came out pale and quiet. He found Sabrina, who was basking in attention near the cake table, and pulled her aside. At first, I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw Sabrina's face twist in confusion, then panic. She started to raise her voice, and Jason, calm but clearly shaken, asked again, "Did you lie to me about college?" The whole room went quiet. You know that moment when music cuts off in movies and everyone just stares? That's exactly how it felt. My dad stepped in, told Jason the truth, that no, Sabrina had never gone to Berkeley, that she'd never even started college. Jason looked like he'd been sucker punched. He asked her, in front of everyone, how she could lie about something that big. Said he'd trusted her, built a future with her based on who she claimed to be. Now, he didn't know what was real anymore. Guests stood frozen. Some of Sabrina's coworkers looked like they were rethinking every conversation they'd ever had with her. One guy even muttered, "Wait, she said she got her MBA last year." She tried to defend herself. "I didn't think it mattered. You love me, right? That's what should matter." Jason wasn't having it. "It matters when your entire identity is a lie." He walked out. His family followed. Party over. Sabrina stood there, shaking, alone. The cake was untouched. The music kept playing for a while, awkwardly, until someone finally turned it off. A few guests filtered out silently. Others whispered on their way out. Even her boss had been there. I don't know what she told him after that, but I wouldn't be surprised if she lost her job. After all, her entire career was built on forged documents. She didn't speak to me afterward. Not at the party. Not in the days that followed. I think she suspects I had something to do with it, but she has no proof. In the note, I specifically asked Jason not to say where the info came from, and he didn't. My parents told her they'd warned her. Told her that honesty mattered, especially in a relationship, but she never listens. It's always someone else's fault. Always a betrayal, never accountability. I flew back to school the next morning, exhausted, numb, but also weirdly at peace. I didn't lie. I didn't scream. I just handed over the truth and let it speak for itself. And Sabrina? She's finally facing the consequences of a lifetime of lies. It's been about a month since the engagement party exploded. The messages started trickling in just a few days after. First from my mom telling me Sabrina was not doing well, that she wasn't eating, barely speaking, that she'd been crying non-stop and staying in bed all day. I felt a little pang of guilt at first. Not because I did something wrong. I didn't. But because this is what it took for her to finally hit rock bottom. Then came the text from Sabrina herself. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just one line, "I know someone told him." I stared at my screen for a while. I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? Yeah, it was me, so she could shift All the rage she's been storing up since childhood right back at me? Nope. Because here's the thing. I didn't blow up her life. She did. I just held up the mirror. Jason officially called off the wedding a week after the party. Returned the ring too well. Technically asked for it back. It was a family heirloom from his mother, and thankfully, Sabrina hadn't pawned it or something. She gave it back. Probably because she didn't want even more backlash. She also had to move out of their shared apartment. Turns out the lease was under Jason's name only. He packed up her things and left them with our parents, then ghosted completely, blocked her on everything. She tried reaching out, of course, called his friends, sent long explanation emails, even tried to meet him at his office. Nothing worked. He was done. From what I heard, her manager had also been at the party that night. Someone in the office must have tipped HR off because they started looking into her paperwork. Within a week, she was on administrative leave. A few days after that, she was fired. Fake degree, falsified documents. All of it caught up to her. When Mom told me she'd been let go, I was sitting on the floor of my dorm room eating ramen, still in sweatpants from an all-nighter. I just said, "Yeah, that checks out." Mom sighed. She's not herself anymore. I almost laughed. Because who exactly is Sabrina when she's not performing? When she's not lying or manipulating or playing the victim? I don't think even she knows. Still, I could hear the ache in Mom's voice. No matter how much Sabrina screws up, she's still her daughter. And I get that. I do. But for me, I've spent most of my life recovering from the damage Sabrina caused. I'm not rushing to fix her now that she's finally facing consequences. She's been bouncing around since then. Tried staying with a friend from her old job, but that didn't last more than a few nights. Word gets around, and people don't exactly want to tie themselves to someone who's been outed as a fraud. She did try one more thing. She emailed me. This time, it was longer. A ramble, mostly. She started off defensive, how I've always been the favorite, how our parents never understood her, how she was just trying to have something of her own for once. Then it turned into self-pity, how she didn't deserve to be humiliated like that, how she was on the verge of starting a new chapter and I took it away from her. She ended the email with this line, "I hope you're happy now." I didn't respond, because I am. I really am. Not because she's hurting, but because for the first time, I didn't let her walk all over me. I didn't try to play nice or smooth things over for the sake of peace. I didn't sacrifice my boundaries to keep her illusions intact. I stood up for what was right, not what was easy, and that's new for me. All my life, I've been the quiet one, the peacemaker, the little sister who took the blame, kept the secrets, stayed in the background. But this time, I decided that honesty mattered more than Sabrina's pride, that Jason deserved the truth, that I deserved peace. I don't regret it. Since then, things have been calmer. I graduated a few weeks ago. My parents came to the ceremony. Sabrina didn't. She wasn't invited, and honestly, I don't think she would have come even if she was. Afterward, my dad pulled me aside, told me he was proud of me, not just for school, but for how I handled everything. He admitted they should have done more when we were kids, that they brushed off too much for too long, that they enabled Sabrina's behavior because they didn't know how to confront it. I just nodded. I wasn't looking for an apology. I just needed them to see it now, and they do. I'm working now, moved to a new city, got my own place. It's small, but it's mine. Quiet, peaceful, no chaos, no tiptoeing around someone else's moods. As for Sabrina, last I heard, she's living with a cousin across the state, still jobless, still trying to figure things out. She hasn't reached out again. Maybe she will someday. Maybe she won't. But I've stopped waiting for her to change because I finally understand something I wish I had known years ago. You can love your family and still choose distance. You can hope they grow without dragging yourself through their storm. And most importantly, you don't owe someone your silence just because they share your blood. Sabrina wanted me to plan her wedding, so I did. Not with flowers or guest lists or seating charts. I planned for the truth to come out, and when it did, everything else unraveled on its own. That wasn't revenge. That was reality catching up. And honestly, it was long overdue.